Hey guys, I'm back with another book talk. And this is the book I actually finished, I want to say 3 weeks ago. Maybe it could be between 3 weeks and a month. So, not everything super clear. Like the stories I remember from this book are more like those that really impacted me, because if I don't talk about it right away, then I forget. So, Children Who Have Lived Before. I loved this book. And I'm going to explain to you how I got to this book. This was a complete and utter coincidence, but we know that there's no coincidences in life anyways, right? I had heard a podcast in Spanish, but I had heard a podcast that talked about the case of a lady named Shanti Devi. And she supposedly is this Indian, was an Indian little girl. Now I'm sure I don't actually know what year it was, but I'm assuming she's either much, much older now, or I don't know if she's passed away. She might have passed away actually already. Shanti Devi was a reincarnation of another woman, and this little girl remembered everything. So I was listening to this podcast episode where they were breaking down the case. I said, how come I've never heard about this? And that's how I originally went down the rabbit hole of all these books about reincarnation, which led me to the one that I previously talked about, which was Soul Survivor. Since I have my Kobo e-reading book, of course, it tells you like, oh, if you like this, you probably will like that. And I love books. So as soon as they suggest something that looks like right up my alley, I'm like, yes, please. So I fall for it every time, which I love anyways. And so I went down the Shanti Devi rabbit hole, and I somehow ended up on this book. And I'm like, oh my God, this book is like, I couldn't put it down. I think I read it in 2 days, which I read a lot, but I'm a super slow reader usually. And so for me to read a book in 2 or 3 days, it must be a good one. It has to be a good one. So I'm going to kind of talk about the things that I learned from the book. And I'm not going to do any spoilers because I can't even remember too many details of the majority of the story. So, and the cool thing about this one is, like the book before we talked about, which was Soul Survivor, the book before, it was just one case, right? In this book, every chapter is a different case. So it's kind of nice. Like you can get into one of the stories one day, sit on your couch in the afternoon, read. Like I have a child. So once I would get her to sleep, I would read a chapter, and then I could maybe go to sleep early, and the next day I'll do another chapter. So it's kind of nice to wrap up stories and then move on to the next one, especially if you have like a super busy life. Like you don't have to remember the details if you took longer to get back to it. So I think that's a kind of positive thing for people that want to read but have a lot going on. So that the one case that for me like jumped out at me, I was like, what? This is insane. It was one that literally, like, Lorena and I have the Patreon, which does additional episodes from the podcast. So we just like delve deeper into things and we channel more, and it's basically for people who are ready to hear more and understand more. So we go deeper, and it challenges me and Lorena's channels as well. So that's basically those reasons why we have it there. And I had just finished reading the book, and I said, no, we got to talk about this on the podcast, or on the Patreon podcast. And I read the whole chapter that had to do with that story, so the Patreon members could hear about it, and then we could talk about it. So now that I hear on YouTube and there's more people or different people, I was thinking about talking about it a little bit again, like briefly. It's a 3-year-old who was born into a family and was remembering a past life. But the whole scenario was that in the life before, that 3-year-old had been killed, and he had been killed by his neighbor. And somehow the kid was able to convince the parents, which didn't seem to be easy. And it had a lot to do with Ian Stevenson had gone to, who was the investigator of the case. He had gone to the kid's home, and somehow with the kid managed to convince them to go to the town nearby, which is where the kid was originally from. And so when they went there, the kid bumped into the murderer, like the individual who had killed the body that the soul had in the other lifetime, if that makes sense. It should. So the past life body was killed by that individual that they bumped into when they went on the visit to the town. And it was this big thing. The town knew that they were coming. So imagine the murderer like was never caught. Imagine the murderer was like, holy moly, this kid supposedly says that he was the person I killed and he's coming back. Like imagine just the mindset of the murderer for a second going, am I going to be caught right now? And yes, he was caught. The little boy saw the individual who, if I'm not mistaken, was his neighbor in the other life. And he said, it was you. And the guy was like, basically like dumbfounded. I don't remember if he responded, but he was kind of pretty silent. I don't know if he said yes to him. And then the little boy said, okay, well, I will take you guys to where he buried my body and where he buried, I think it was an axe that he had killed him with. And the boy was able to go to like this area and show exactly where the body was buried, which they found, and the supposed weapon that he was killed with, which was also buried. And so, I mean, come on, like what more evidence do you need than a 3-year-old going, this is the guy that killed me, here's the body, and here's like, how could he, impossible. Like if you need proof, that for me is like the case that's like, it's like the topping on the cake. Like you cannot get more proof than that. Like if you need to really help believing it, like go read that book and go find that case. It's literally called, the chapter is called The 3-Year-Old That Convicted His Murderer. So the locals were like this, they're this very religious based individuals whom apparently from the end of the story, they weren't going to put the case over to the local authorities. They were going to take it into their own hands. So I don't know what happened to the murderer. But hey, at least he was shunned because that town believes, and that religion believes in reincarnation. So I thought that was an interesting story. And I think that's really worth looking into if you're really into that kind of stuff. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how the soul comes in with those remnants from the past life, to the point where this book talks about how scars can be seen where the individual had been, for example, hurt or killed. Like let's say that the person got a knife in their back and that's how they died. And then the next incarnation, when the soul comes into the new body, there's actually a scar right here. And it's actually where the knife had hit them in the back and killed them. So it's almost like, if you had to ask me as an individual who connects with this energy, understands information, I believe that there's some sort of energy field that's still traumatized by that scenario that went through. And that level of trauma seems to still be in the energy fields of the soul when it incarnates into the next lifetime. And so it shows up in the body. I mean, another really good example of that is the book that made so many, I mean, I would say everybody wake up, but I'm saying, I don't know if everybody, but like, I think a lot of people woke up from the book from Brian Weiss. Was it Many Lives, Many Masters? The one that talks about the case of Catherine, where like the soldier, and in this case, I believe, because I read this book many years ago, but I believe that she had pain in the area where she had been like hurt when as a soldier, she had been killed. And I believe that she didn't have a scar, but she had pain in that area. So that's still in the energetic fields of the individual, right? So you'll hear a lot in the book about scars and stuff showing up. And I believe that the souls were not able to release that trauma from the way of leaving or the attack, or even like the backstabbing. Like who knows, the level of emotional baggage that way of exiting the world had happened, right? So I think that's part of it. And then another thing that's super interesting that you figure out with the book is that deformities, some of these children are born with deformities. And the case that comes to my mind from this book is this little kid that had mangled his hand, the fingers. He had put it in this machinery in a farm that his family owned. It was I think it was an infant. I can't remember the age, but the child ended up going to the hospital, did not make it. I think died a few days later. And then in the town nearby, another child was born who had a deformity with didn't have all the fingers. in the exact same hand. I think it was the left hand, if I'm not mistaken. And they were born with a lack of fingers in the exact same hand that it had happened in the life. Of course, the child, in this case, we know that because the child remembered the incident, remembered that where the family lived, and they were able to reconnect with that family. And the family took that child in a way as almost like the reincarnation. Like they accepted it, the reincarnation of their child once again. So it's interesting to see either scars or these like deformities. And another thing the book was explaining is like these deformities couldn't be explained. Some of these deformities are like, usually what happens with this deformity is both hands have it, not one. So there's very particular things that the book breaks down about the deformities. And you say, oh, well, then it has to be an energetic something that's from the other lifetime. There's no other option. And it's the same exact hand, and it's all the fingers that have been mangled off. Like, come on, like, it's amazing. It's just amazing that this with not what happened, of course, isn't amazing, but like the proof that you're able to gather from all those scenarios is pretty amazing. So I thought that was cool to be able to learn that. And then the other thing that I found interesting is why were these cases able to be discovered? And my conclusion is, first of all, it has to happen in a smaller, the soul needs to reincarnate in a smaller lapse of time. So it's like the soul needs to come back before the individual from the other life have already died. So they're coming back really quickly. So I think that's I think there's quite a few things that are playing into the role of these souls being able to remember, but also it being able to be found out. And so one of those is they come soon enough, they reincarnate soon enough so that those individuals are still alive, can still be found, and the information could still be confirmed, right? So that's one of them. I also believe, as an individual who reads the Akashic Records, who sees in the readings I do with people, you'll see how things kind of work on the reincarnation side. And a very common thing is for souls to take their dandy old time to come back, because some lifetimes are super heavy, because maybe they want a semi-sabbatical in a way. But you'll find that souls will take they can take hundreds of years. They can take thousands of years. Remember, we have time here. But in the other dimensions, time functions differently, or there's no time at all. It's just really different. The energy is different. And so for us, time is a thing here. And so the soul could be on the other side, and it could feel like a snap of a finger 1 second, but then when they come back, or like 100 years passed or something. So I feel like they come much quicker than most souls do. I really believe that. I think that we do have some souls that come back quickly because they want to be born into the grandchildren of the family or something. That can happen as well. But I think the majority of souls take their time to to cleanse. There's a process of like letting go, shedding the life from before. Like, let's say that Lucia left today. Like, I have to slowly drop the ego of Lucia, slowly drop like the trauma or the fears that Lucia had, the limitations Lucia had, start detaching from that lifetime. And I'm leaving behind usually family members I love, friends that I love, and so the soul needs to start detaching from that and start enjoying itself on that in the other dimension. And so I believe that that's a slow process, and every soul takes its time, and some souls might want to come sooner or not. I believe that these cases were able to be remembered because they came quicker, and they wanted to come quicker. Maybe they wanted to heal that, and the best way to heal it was to confront it again. So I think that a lot of these souls might have done that on purpose, like come so quickly on purpose, so they could cleanse that through by it being recognized, and then maybe re-meeting up with their family or convicting their murderer, like, hey, I want this guy to pay for what he did, or he needs to be found out, kind of thing. Who knows, right? So those are aspects I think that the souls considered when they decided to come back so quickly. And the other thing is they seem to always be born in a town nearby. And that's really convenient. These cases are like more from like the area of like Asia. And so you have less, at least in the era that they're looking into these cases, the era and the area, there's not so much like internet connection, or there's not so much like getting to those towns nearby didn't seem so easy. Like if you jumped into your car, like I'm in Holland, like go into my car, I'm just going to go over and drive over to Germany, where I think my soul had a lifetime. Like it sounds, the way they describe it, it sounds to be a little bit more difficult for those souls to create those connections and find the evidence. And so I think it's the era, I think it's the area, and the culture, of course, right? But the one other thing is that the majority of these cultures that are in these cases believe in reincarnation. So not only did the soul come back quickly, not only did the soul reincarnate into a town nearby that they could easily access the last town that they lived in, on top of that, the majority of them were reborn into a family that actually believes in reincarnation, which really helped them be heard. Some of them were easily heard, some of them not so much, and they had to keep repeating. The children had to keep repeating the stories and what they were feeling, things like that. But you could see a pattern of these cases and how they could be more easily discovered. There's probably hundreds, thousands more cases of souls that people that at some point on Earth were reincarnated and remembered, but maybe they were born into families that didn't believe in reincarnation. Maybe they were born countries, continents away. Maybe they were born much after, so the evidence and the individuals are no longer around to kind of corroborate or meet up with them. So that's why I think that these cases were so amazing. Like they were able to confirm all these things, and the families were able to travel to the towns nearby to kind of do that, to look into that, to find out, is what this kid's saying, is it like true? Like, is he making this up? Like, imagine having your son say, hey mom, yeah, you know, my deformed hand, like actually it's the remnants of my soul's last lifetime, because I was this little boy or this little girl in the town over here and I had this accident. Imagine the mom going, okay, he's saying that. Like, if you don't believe in reincarnation, the mom might say to herself, oh, he's saying that to make himself feel better, to accept his, you know, he's different from everybody else, he's just saying it to himself to feel better. Like, the mindset of the parent is really important to support the child and to carry through, so they can kind of clear that out, meet up with that, and do what they came here to do. So I think some of those cases do that. I also think some other cases are just super in the cycle of trauma from that other lifetime, and it's not specifically that they're here to figure it out or convict someone or meet up with a family again, but I think that they just came really soon. Maybe they incarnated in an area nearby because that's where their vibrational frequency likes to be, and they actually don't mean to do anything with that. So I think that we have several different cases. Like, that's the energy I get from the cases when I'm reading about them. The Akashic Records make me understand that some of those cases want to be found out, and some of those cases seem to just be cycling through past reincarnation issues that they want to just clear out because they weren't able to properly do it in the other dimension. And when they meet up with their spiritual team and they do like their life review, they for some reason, some souls decide, well, I'm just going to go back and filter through those remnants in a 3D form instead of up here in the dimensional other dimension, kind of cycling through them and figuring out, how can I cleanse this out? How can I get rid of it? Or how can I learn from it, right? So I think we have different reasons, all the different souls, but the cases are extraordinary. Like, and this book isn't just about one investigator. This book, basically what I like is it grabs investigations of different individuals that were investigating each case. So you don't have just one person looking into the cases. There's quite a few different, and you'll read about it in the book, like who did the investigate, the original case, who was it discovered by, and who looked into it, right, and who helped the family work on it. So another book recommendation from my side, and if I repeat myself, I would say a lot of things that I said similar to Soul Survivor. Like, we're incredible beings that just keep coming back into this 3D density that's not the easiest thing in the world. And we're like dedicated to expanding ourselves. And some souls might actually decide to expand themselves staying up there and expanding from there. But I like to say it's like you get more bang for your buck. Like, when souls come into this 3D dimensional dense place, it's like you get more bang for your buck in the sense that the soul expands and learns much more in a shorter amount of time. So I believe that that's one of the really big reasons why souls come here. And also because souls like to experience. I know that for us humans, and for me, at least, Lucia, I find it really hard when the Akashic Records say, like, souls actually want to experience 3D density, and souls really want to like have this, for example, my trigger, lack of freedom. So I can really feel passionate about freedom and, you know, lack of I don't know, of abundance, so I can work on my creator energy and learn to bring in abundance. Like for me, sometimes figuring out why a soul would want that limitation, my human Lucia brain's like why just learn about it over there where it's nice and easy. But of course, since it's nice and easy, you're not going to learn about it the same way as if you were down here in 3D trying to figure out and like getting things going. So great reminder of what we really are. Once again, I'm going to say it, like wonderful reminder of the creator energies that we can bring in, wonderful reminder of how souls do things totally different. Because there's one thing the Akashic Records have taught me since the moment I started reading other people, mostly because when you read yourself as a reader, like it's just you and your information. But when I became a reader for other people, it was so many stories, and you see how different each spiritual team works, and you see how different each soul comes in and says, oh, I want to do this way because I want to learn this. Like they all have different, I guess, call it strategies, but these souls have all these different ways of functioning. There's not this one way souls do it. And that's the biggest thing I think I learned from reading other individuals' Akashic Records, that souls do things differently and like to do things in their own way. A lot of it has to do with what their total soul mission purpose is, or I like to say like what they like to do in the other dimension. Because just like we have passions here, like Lucia's into the Akashic Records, maybe my soul's also into the Akashic Records over there, or maybe my soul's into something else, but our souls are really into something or passionate about something in the other dimensions as well. It's not just us, the human form. So sometimes they'll decide to do things differently from another soul because of their tendencies of what they like doing on the other side, or what the mission is with that. So maybe someone that's obsessed with the Akashic Records like Lorraine and I are, it's because our souls work directly with the Akashic Records on the other side. And so our souls would be like, oh, working with the Akashic Records in the fifth dimension is amazing. You know what would be really amazing? Let's get ourselves into 3D density and let's experience the Akashic Records from another dimension, from a heavier density, and see how that feels, see how it works out, see what it does to our lifetimes and everyone else's lifetimes that connect with us and connect, through us. And so that's why every soul has a different purpose, a different mission, a different way of functioning, a different way of planning, a different way of incarnating. So it's another good lesson to like, don't put yourself in a box and compare yourself with anybody, because even our souls are so different. Every soul is unique and functions differently and desires differently and does purpose planning differently. And so don't compare yourself to like, I don't know, your classmate next to you or your coworker next to you or your neighbor. Oh, they always do better than me. Or I think that humans have a lot of that, like comparing yourself, because you'll see when you read things like this book, like you'll see that every soul's so completely different, and every soul deals with everything differently. And so that goes for everything. So love yourself, don't compare yourself. And if you're going to compare yourself, be like, dude, I nailed that. like compare yourself to yourself, how you would have done that like a month ago. Like pat yourself on the back, like, whoa, a month ago I wouldn't have been able to do that. For me, this is like making more videos and showing my face more, even though like it's not that I'm afraid to show myself, it's that it's a little uncomfortable. Like I've gotten used to kind of being able to be in my pajamas and have my dirty bun up and not have to worry about what I look. And I'm just talking to the podcast through the podcast, like just audio, and I don't have to worry about how I look. And now I'm like pushing myself through my comfort zone and I'm putting my face out there more. And that's, pat on the back for myself. Like a month ago, I wasn't doing it that much. And now I've made 2 videos, for example. So whatever little progress you make, pat yourself on the back, because it's awesome. Like whatever comfort zone push you did, it's worth recognizing. So love yourself. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Dude, get to this book. It's freaking awesome. Like I loved it. 100% recommend it, just like the one before. But of course, I'm not going to come on here to talk about a book I didn't like. So you're going to probably always hear me at the end of most of my videos going, recommend this book, read it, because if I'm talking about it, it's because I loved it. So bye guys.